What Really Happened with your host, Mike Rivero. The history the government hopes you never learn. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Monday, May 13th, 2019, start of a brand new week here. And boy, are we off to a rocky start. I'm trying to get a weather report to see if it's raining stockbrokers on Wall Street right now. And I hate to say I told you so, but, well, yeah, a lot of people were saying this was going to not turn out well, this trade war. So the stock market is way, way down. The Dow at one point was down 700. The NASDAQ was off 3%. That's serious stuff. Okay, and we'll be talking about that a little bit later in the program. But I don't think this is going to end well. Okay, we've been talking about the possibility of a false flag to try and kick off war with Iran, and there may have been an attempt over the weekend. Something really weird went on down over at the United Arab Emirates. There were explosions being reported on social media, and the UAE initially denied anything had happened. Then they came on back and said that 4 commercial vessels had been targeted by what they called sabotage operations near its territorial waters. Now they backed off and said it was only 2. And so they're a little fuzzy on that. But Saudi Arabia said 2 of its oil tankers were among those attacked off the coast of the United Arab Emirates and described it as an attempt to undermine the security of crude supplies amid tensions between the United States and Iran. So I guess we're back up to 4 of them, 4 ships. 2 of them were Saudi. Another one was Norwegian. Another one was flagged as the UAE. So what's going on here? And was this an attempt to get a false flag going to blame on Iran? And how did they botch it? Now remember, it was only last Friday that the U.S. Maritime Administration issued a statement claiming it was possible Iran would attack commercial ships, maybe even oil tankers, in the waters around their country. And this is part of that ramp up of everybody saying, oh, Iran's coming to attack us, Iran's coming to attack us. So what went wrong? Why are we not seeing all these headlines all over the corporate media about Iran has attacked ships off the UAE? Well, over at Jim Stone's website, he has an interesting little story about how the Lebanese media jumped the gun and released news of the attack before it happened. And Jim Stone is also saying that it's all over social media that American warplanes were seen flying in that area in a very aggressive manner. So that's what's coming from that part of the world. John Bolton is out there trying to spin Israeli intelligence to push for the war with Iran. This isn't going to wait till fall. There was the supposed White House insider said Trump is going to have war with Iran by the fall. No, this is not going to hold. This is going to be happening in weeks, by the end of the month. So basically, Bolton is out there pushing for it. And interestingly enough, Iran's Foreign Minister Mohammad Javad Zarif has basically retweeted a 2017 article by John Bolton that was published in the magazine National Review. And it was all talking about the plan to get Washington out of the 2015 Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action and point the United States toward war. This was before Bolton joined the White House. He was already out there pushing for this thing. Okay, Mike Pompeo has now called off his trip to Moscow and is meeting with Vladimir Putin to fly to Brussels to crash an EU meeting exploring ways of salvaging the Iran nuclear deal. Don't want that to continue. They want that off. I mean, they're just making it very obvious. The U.S. We want the war with Iran. That's what's going to happen. And this is a major diplomatic faux pas. I mean, Pompeo did this last week with Angela Merkel. Was on his way to Germany for a meeting with her, blew her off, stopped in Iraq to try and pressure Iraq's leaders to resist cooperation with Iran. And so he's done it again. And in the world of international diplomacy, that is a horrible, horrible insult. This thing is just a circus. Article out of Middle East Eye asking, are the U.S. and Iran headed for a war? Well, it certainly looks like it. And they're saying thousands could die. It could ignite a regional war where you have all these different countries across the Mideast are going to be at war with each other. We're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. And over at the Arab Center in Washington, D.C., the Director of Research and Analysis is saying it's going to be catastrophic. There are going to be deadly battles all across the Middle East. Over in Iran, they're taking a different tone. The head of the Revolutionary Guard Corps, General Hossein Salami, is basically out there saying that the aircraft carrier group is just psychological warfare and intimidation. And he went on to say that a U.S. attack against Iran, well, he said it was impossible, claiming that Washington lacked the necessary military strength, not counting tactical nukes. Another senior commander claimed Iran has the firepower to hit the U.S. in the head should it come to that. So both sides are talking tough. Neither side wants to back down and make nice. Another article, this one out of Mondo Weiss, the U.S. corporate media is contributing to the rising risk of war with Iran. And basically, they're doing this by failing to report to the American people about this escalating threats, escalating moves. The U.S. print media is also mostly ignoring the story, except to take dictation from Pentagon sources, which is then published without qualification, without independent sourcing. They want you looking the other way when it happens, just like on 9/11. They want it to be a complete psychic shock. Now, Iraqi Shia cleric and leader of the National Wisdom Movement, Ammar al-Hakim, is out there saying that Iraq will not stand idle if the U.S. steps up the anti-Iran campaign. And he went out there to say we have to protect Iraq from any potential fallouts of this conflict because when the call for war was made, reason and logic is forgotten. He's certainly right about that one. The United States' push to cut Iran's oil exports to zero signals a transition from a policy of pressure to a policy of suffocating Iran, its government, and its people. This move will have very dangerous and tragic implications for the region. Yeah, they're going to set the whole place on fire is what they're going to do. Turning back now over to Syria, the Syrian Arab Army has secured the town of Arama in the northwestern Hama countryside. They did that yesterday following heavy clashes with Hayat Tahrir al-Sham. The army entered the key town a day earlier. There was some counterattacks by HTS and its allies, but ultimately the pro-government forces won, and they've released photos showing the bodies of dozens of terrorists who were killed by the army in northwestern Hama. Over on the other part of Syria, the Syrian Arab Army has once again shelled an observation post of the Turkish military around the town of Shir Mugar in the northwestern Hama countryside with more than 13 artillery rounds. The sources released a photo showing white smoke rising from the post's outskirts. However, they have yet to provide any evidence confirming the army was behind the shelling. That's what Turkey is claiming, though. Now, the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons launched an engineering assessment regarding the alleged chemical attack in Duma last April. And they went on in, and they basically looked at all the forensic evidence. They looked at the canisters, and in true investigative style, they looked for what should have been there and wasn't. Damage to the canisters, damage to the ground, had these really been lobbed in from a distance. And the conclusion of the engineering sub-team of the OPCW is that the Duma chemical weapon attack was staged. They just went on in, they put a bunch of props, and they staged it. It's another war-starting lie. Up in Afghanistan, there's this Afghan journalist and political advisor who's a strong supporter of women's rights. Mina Mangai was shot dead Saturday in a public place when she was on her way to work in Kabul. And she had been telling people she believed her life was in danger. So it looks like, yes, she got assassinated. Over in Israel, they have already violated the truce, and Israeli military vehicles raided Palestinian lands this morning east of Beit Hanun in the northern besieged Gaza Strip. Israel sent in 6 large D9 military bulldozers, and they entered dozens of meters into Palestinian lands. And apparently the bulldozers raised and leveled the lands while drones flew overhead. So it's still going on over there. Israeli home demolitions have skyrocketed in Jerusalem. They're just taking the properties and knocking them down. They're not even pretending to try and be fair or humane or just. But the Israeli occupation forces have sharply escalated their demolitions of Palestinian properties in East Jerusalem. And more Palestinians have been made homeless this year than in all of last year. And we're not even halfway through the year. Now, United Nations Humanitarian Coordinator Jamie McGoldrick decried the alarming trend, calling on Israel to immediately halt all destruction of Palestinian property. Sorry, Jamie, they're not going to listen to you. As you probably are aware, we're coming up on the Eurovision contest. It's been very controversial because it's being held in Jerusalem. And it was being held in Jerusalem because an Israeli artist won the contest last year with a public online vote that many viewed as highly suspicious and was possibly subject to rigging. The idea that Israel wanted to host the Eurovision contest as part of its efforts to polish up its image, to give it a more positive image. Well, apparently somebody has managed to put up a billboard protesting Israel's occupation of the West Bank on the road leading from Ben Gurion International Airport into Tel Aviv. And the billboard says, "Dare to dream of freedom." I wonder how long it's going to stay there. All right, we're getting more information leaking out about the deal of the century. And this is Jared Kushner's baby. And according to the leaks we're getting now, the Israeli military would retain control over the settlements, the Jordan Valley, and borders for 5 years as final status negotiations continue. The plan would cement the status quo between the Israelis and Palestinians, and the only concession asked of Israel would be freezing settlement building at the heart of the West Bank during that initial 5-year period. Doesn't sound like much of a deal to me. Jared Kushner was out there talking about the situation here and just basically dissing the Palestinian people and saying people have been funding this thing for a long time. They've gotten more aid than any group of people in history, and what we have to show for it is really not much at this point. Of course, Jared Kushner is completely wrong. Israel gets an average of $3.5 billion a year, and they have been for the last 66 years, just from the United States, The Palestinians have received about $1.7 billion a year in total from all international donors. So here we have Jared Kushner, who's out there putting together this deal of the century, and he's not in command of the reality of the situation. So shame on him. Turning on down now to Venezuela. Juan Guaido has now officially requested U.S. military support. And he's basically saying, come on in, restore our democracy. And he sent a letter to the commander of the U.S. Southern Command, Admiral Craig Fowler. And Guaido wants direct communication with the U.S. military. In other words, he wants U.S. forces on the ground in Venezuela under his control. Don't think he's going to get that one. But it looks like there's going to be another U.S. military intervention in Venezuela. It's just unwinding all over the world. Okay. Former Defense Secretary Robert Gates had said that North Korea is unlikely to ever give up all of its nuclear weapons. And he is saying that Trump was right to walk away from the deal with Kim Jong-un. Now, Gates said that North Koreans have come to see some modest nuclear capabilities as essential to their national survival. And I can understand why they would think that, with the U.S. mongering war all over the planet. The whole point of having nuclear weapons is to not get invaded. Every nation that is a nuclear-armed nation, they have those weapons to say, leave us alone. In all the history of nuclear weapons development, all the testing and espionage and everything going on, you need to remember, nuclear weapons have only ever been used in combat. Twice. Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And historians are looking back and saying that the U.S. didn't really need to do that. They only did it to demonstrate we actually had the things. There is renewed interest now on the so-called dancing Israelis who were arrested on 9/11. And apparently some additional photos of these Mossad agents have been revealed after a Freedom of Information Act request, and I think Ryan Dawson has been part of this. Nobody's really reporting on this all this much, but to basically on 9/11, these 5 Israelis traveling in a company van from a moving company, which was also owned by an Israeli, were arrested in connection with a terrorist attack on the World Trade Center. According to the police, they found traces of explosives in the van. The men were detained and questioned for more than 70 days before being deported to Israel without being charged with a crime. Now, when they got back there, and they were stars on Israeli TV, and they said their stated purpose where they were was to document the event. Some of the witnesses around where the van had been parked said they arrived before the first plane struck the North Tower, indicating they knew there was going to be an event to document. Now, this is actually a positive story, and this has to do with a U.S. Air Force pilot. He's 98 years old, and he's known as the Candy Bomber, or the Chocolate Fluger. And he became famous for dropping sweets to the children during the Berlin airlift. More about him when we come back from these words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here, and we're talking about Gail Halverson. He's 98 years old. He's a former U.S. Air Force pilot, and he was part of the Berlin airlift, where they were getting supplies into West Berlin after the Soviet Union blocked the railway, road, and canal access to the city in order to get them to basically agree to become part of the Soviet Union, which, by the way, that failed. So Halverson basically got the idea when he was going over there, and he saw all those kids, down there he started making up these little packages of candy with little tiny parachutes on them, and he would just drop them out the window of his plane as he flew over the city. And he became famous for that. There is a little wrinkle to the story. It doesn't appear in the article that I linked to on this, but Halverson also noticed that on the other side of the Berlin Wall, there were also a lot of children watching what was going on, and they would wave to his airplane. And so he did one flight, only one, where he just flipped over the Berlin Wall real quick, threw out some candy, and skedaddled back on over. Boy, the Soviet government just went ballistic, said it was a blatant attempt to undermine their control, propaganda, blah, blah. Halverson got in a little bit of trouble for that one, and he never did it again. But apparently they had him as a guest of honor in Berlin today, where he basically put on his old military uniform and he signed autographs and he posed for pictures. So good for him. 98, that's doing really, really good. Okay, we got a caller on the line, Philip in Virginia. Aloha, Philip. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike. Yeah, what's on my mind is what you just recently covered about the dancing Israelis. Could you repeat that? And I want to tie that into a film that I just watched and how Hollywood telegraphs or reveals things that are going on within our government or special interests that have ulterior motives and agendas to further their own goals. You know, like The Long Kiss Goodnight. Remember that? How the intelligence guy was saying that we needed to bring about this terrorist attack to justify our being and our existence and to mobilize, you know, the like the Project for a New American Century said, imperial mobilization.
Yes. Well, you know, again, we all remember 9/11, and I think most of us remember the story of the dancing Israelis.
Right, and you just mentioned some more information referring to the dancing Israelis.
Yeah, there was a Freedom of Information Act request where more of the photos taken of them during their arrest have been released, and so now we have some much better look at their faces.
Wow. Well, you know, that's infuriating with this information that we already know about, that they were there admittedly to document the event.
Yes.
I mean, come on, people. But anyway, I watched another film actually just today, and they revealed another scenario where they have these rogue intelligence agencies that are bringing about a terror attack to justify their budget or whatever. And it's called Unlocked, with Michael Douglas and John Malkovich and a couple other people you're probably familiar with. So I would like to recommend that to your audience as well. And I mean, here it is. They just throw this stuff in our face. And, you know, when you mention it, and how it's actually playing out in reality, oh, that's just a conspiracy theory. They downplay it and ignore it and marginalize you and everything else. So I was just, you know, wanted to share that with you. It's called Unlocked, and I was surprised that Michael Douglas was in this film. And I don't recall the year that it came out, but yeah, they launched a biological attack in order to, you know, keep the as you put it, the daily booga booga.
Yes. Okay,
Yeah.
Unlocked
Yep.
came out in 2017.
Wow, that recent.
Yep.
Okay. Well, it was pretty chilling, you know, to how they, you know, were able to project, you know, this scenario and how they brought it all about and how they where it was carried out and all of that stuff. So I mean,
well,
they're actually giving people ideas.
I mean, there have been cases where doctors in small towns have deliberately started waves of illness to build their business. We know that police departments need there to be crime out there to justify their budgets. And so it's not really that much of a leap for this movie. Anyway, Philip, I got to let you go. We got to take another break here for commercials.
Aloha.
And we'll be right back. And aloha, Mirko. Welcome back to our show here. And seem to be having a little bit of technical difficulties with our feed from RBN. I'm sure they're working on it. Turning to our domestic local politics, Debbie Wasserman Schultz is out there still kicking the dead horse, and apparently last Friday on MSNBC, Schultz basically said that yes, Trump did collude with Russia and he obstructed justice to cover it up, and based on her interpretation of Robert Mueller's report, there was collusion and obstruction. So they can't let it go. They absolutely cannot let it go. And notice Debbie Wasserman Schultz is out there saying it's her interpretation of the Mueller report, as opposed to getting on down to the part of the report where it says we found no evidence of collusion. Over at MSNBC, Rachel Maddow is still not dealing with the fact that this entire Donald Trump-Russia collusion hoax turned out to be a hoax. And she's out there on the air saying the president had lied. Maddow told former FBI General Counsel James Baker last Friday, the Mueller report describes factual connections to the Russians. However, she refused to mention that Mueller himself and former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton actually were colluding with the Russians and were involved in talks that led to the covert sale of 1/5 of U.S. uranium reserves, in which the Clintons and others profited. They just can't let it go. They just cannot let it go. And I'm stunned. I'm trying to figure out what is driving these people. I mean, Trump is basically giving the deep state everything they want, all the wars they could possibly want, maybe more wars they can deal with. Meanwhile, Senator Lindsey Graham, chair of the Senate Judiciary Committee, that he is working to declassify a document that would prove definitively that authorities knew that the Steele dossier, which was used by the FBI to get those FISA warrants, lacked any substantial independent corroboration. So apparently they did know the dossier was junk. So there was no verification. There was no proof. Was no independent confirmation, and it was used to get a warrant. So now this article in Breitbart has a somewhat different spin, saying that James Comey didn't know whether the dossier claims were true when he went ahead and used it in the FISA application. But October 2016, Comey signed the first of 3 successful FISA applications to obtain warrants to spy on Trump campaign advisor Carter Page. This was in the run-up to the election. The second and third were actually renewal applications, since a FISA warrant must be renewed every 90 days. Now, this article over at Investment Watch blog is saying that Obama did know. He knew that the Steele dossier was fake before it was used to get those FISA warrants. In fact, at a bare minimum of 10 days ahead of time. All right. Okay, the Office of the Inspector General report on the FISA abuse. Basically, Horowitz has concluded that all 3 of the FISA renewals were obtained illegally. Now, here's where it gets a little bit interesting and why Comey may be out there rattling around the cage a bit. Judiciary Committee member John Ratcliffe has come on out and basically said James Comey is under investigation for violations of the Espionage Act. And Ratcliffe is not a guy who plays games. He's very deliberate, good reputation. If he's saying it, there's something serious going on there. Craig Murray is out there talking about the real Muellergate scandal, saying that Mueller just went in with a get Donald Trump attitude. It was never objective. It was never unbiased. They were out there on a hunting mission. Get the goods on Trump and Russia. And Craig Murray is saying basically Mueller deliberately and systematically excluded from evidence anything that contradicted that view. He didn't commission a forensic examination of the DNC servers. He didn't interview Bill Binney. He did not interview Julian Assange. His entire report was all about, we're going to get Donald Trump, we're going to bring him down. And he ultimately failed to do that. So over at Chimp Planet, they're saying the Mueller report basically says it's time to investigate the investigators. Just how this all came to be, who was lying, who was misusing the law. And do you love how the corporate media, as much as they went after Trump for the last 2 years on this collusion stuff, which was a pure fantasy, still won't touch the Uranium One deal, still won't touch how the DNC stole the nomination from Bernie Sanders. This entire government, Justice Department, FBI, they're just openly hostile to President Trump. Okay. Over at Judicial Watch, Tom Fitton is coming out there saying they've uncovered new emails that show Obama's White House orchestrated a cover-up of Hillary Clinton's email. And apparently the Obama White House was tracking a Freedom of Information Act request for Hillary emails that was improperly denied by the State Department. They didn't really have legal grounds to deny it, and apparently it was urgent enough where Obama's White House was saying, where is it? Where's the Freedom of Information Act request? But if you really look at it, if this thing ever had a chance to break out through the corporate media's firewalls or whatever, this illegal spying on the Trump campaign, this is the biggest corruption scandal in American history. This is bigger than Watergate. Okay, Representative Rashida, I don't even know how to pronounce this, Tlaib, just opened her mouth and she came out with this comment about the Holocaust. She said, there's always kind of a calming feeling. I tell folks when I think of the Holocaust and the tragedy of the Holocaust and the fact that it was my ancestors, Palestinians, who lost their land and some lost their lives, their livelihood, their human dignity, their existence in many ways have been wiped out, and some people's passports to make the land of Israel for the Jews. And of course, she's being roasted for this. All right, let's go back to the phones here. Layla in Canada. Aloha, Layla. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Actually, a couple of things. First of all, I wanted to respond to Rashida Tlaib, who I believe was born in Michigan. I was born in Bethlehem at the time when it was part of the Palestinian province that was being governed by the Ottomans. What Tlaib forgets is that there were many people who actually sought refuge in that mainland along the coast, who come from many different places. And she also forgets that the Arabs controlled that area for 1,400 years, wiping out the original identity on the surface of the people who are there. So whether they were one ethnicity is an absurdity. So I disagree with that. And for her to be making these claims, she's also ignoring what's happening in Africa and all the rest of the world, where there are numerous other people who are suffering equally, if not far greater deprivations and pain than they are in Palestine. Now, I say this with all compassion and understanding of the Palestinian dilemma, but they have advanced in many ways because of the existence of the westernized culture of Israel, despite the fact that I'm very much opposed to Zionism and its enterprise from the start. But anyway, the reason I called is, that I started to call, was that you said something about Bernie Sanders being robbed of his nomination. I don't know, do you really believe that these are two separate parties? That they are not all controlled by an internal elite, and that what is happening on the fringes is all smoke and mirrors and just a distraction? And basically, when there used to be multiple tents in a circus, it's the guys under the big top who are calling the shots. Bernie Sanders is too old to be president, and if he had been elected, I don't think people would have been able to tolerate his accent for very long, his very Jewish northeastern accent. But even so, Trump has failed. Trump was always planned to be the president, and he has failed the people, but he has fulfilled his obligations in order to actually be given the presidency.
Well, let me cut in here for just a second. There is no question that both political parties' leadership is compromised by money. You have the billionaires out there. They basically give money to both sides, so they're totally in control. But I don't think it's as in control as you like to imagine. I think that Hillary was supposed to be the intended president back in 2016, and that's why everybody got so upset when Trump won. It basically said, hey, your control on the American voters and the American elections is not ironclad.
I would have to agree with that to a certain extent, although whether it was Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump, it would have been 6 of this or half a dozen of the other in the ultimate outcome. The only thing is who was more palatable as the apparent leader or the president. So I don't think it really matters anymore. Trump is doing what he was supposed to do, what he agreed to do prior to even putting his name forward as a candidate. And if I may, on one more point where you always talk about the risks of plastic and credit cards.
Yes.
I would like to issue a very serious warning to anybody who is holding a Capital One credit card. They are a highly compromised company. I'm trying to find out if they belong to something called the Pamoja Group, Pamoja Capital Group, P as in Peter, O, M as in Mother, OJA. On their online website puts a whole bunch of African faces as being the top executives, but it's actually a global octopus with its tentacles all over. And besides, we know credit card companies belong to banks, and all banks belong to one central bank. So your advice, get rid of your plastic. It's like leaving your back door open. I have been defrauded of money that Capital One first gave me benefit for. They gave me credit, and then without giving me any heads up, they rebilled me for those fraudulent charges. So I'm now in the midst of an extensive dispute. It's a couple of $1,000, so it matters. Not only did they steal money out of my credit card, but they also took it out of my PayPal account. And yes, it was an Israeli company. My mistake for dealing with them. But the liability stems from especially Capital One, because it doesn't have a brick and mortar building. It's just an online site. And when you deal with customer service, you're dealing with people in the Philippines who barely speak English. When you're dealing with the fraud department, you're dealing with people in Costa Rica who also may not speak English and take diligent notes. So I've had to repeat over and over and over again for hours on end since January, all the fraudulent steps that they have taken, and they nonetheless rebuild me for the credits that I got. So now I'm in the process of trying to get credit back, but it's too late now because I canceled my card. So your advice, plastic is not only a liability because of the temptation to overspend, it's also leaving your back door open, because
Yes.
any merchant who is unethical and may have a financial benefit in relation to Capital One belongs to MasterCard. I'd like to know who owns MasterCard. Is Visa really independent of the same ones who own MasterCard? Of course not, because they're all owned by the same banks. Much like the political parties around the world are basically run by the same elite with the same kinds of strategies, and they play the same games with us. So it's excellent advice that you've been given, and I just wanted to second it. Everybody get rid of your credit cards and make sure that you pursue any fraudulent charges that are questionable to you. All the best. Take care, Mike.
All right, thanks an awful lot, Layla, and I hope you were able to work that out. And I have the credit cards, it's not just plunging yourselves into debt and being plunged into debt. It's all these cards, they're all vulnerable. We're seeing how cybercrime is just completely out of control. And like Layla says, it's having a credit card or having a debit card is like leaving your back door open. That's why, I prefer cash and carry. And one of the things that always bothers me when I'm at the store these days is the person in front of me at the check stand, they're going through all the pushing the buttons and the swiping this and the plugging in that. And it's like, it just takes forever to get it done. And I don't know to whose advantage that is all supposed to be. By the way, something else, as long as we're on the topic of cards, those gift cards? You go to the store and you get one of these gift cards, and it's very pretty on the front. Maybe it says happy birthday, and you pay to put $50 onto it along with a small fee. You don't need to do that. That's another way banks scam everybody, because hardly anybody runs those cards down to absolute zero. They just sit around in a drawer with maybe $5-10 still left on them, which is basically free money for the banks. So you may want to think about that. Okay. So, as we mentioned briefly earlier in the show, the stock market took a real clubbing. Got to be feeling like a baby seal right about now. And this was, of course, the response to the fact that China has imposed retaliatory tariffs. We've got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And we're going to go ahead and take a phone call before we get into the stock market antics. James in North Carolina, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Good afternoon, Mike. I thought I'd just mention one thing. You talked about free money for the banks just a minute ago, and I don't know what the all-time record is, and maybe you had some experience with it, but there's this thing called the float, and just as an example, I once had it take 8 days for a deposit to go from my bank and show up in PayPal.
Okay.
I don't know if that's a record, but from what
it sounds like it.
People talk about. Well, I've heard other people talk about taking several days for payments to go from one bank to another, or from a bank to PayPal, or some other deposit, some other account that they have.
Okay.
But that's a huge amount of money that the bank.
It is, and when it's sort of hanging there in limbo between the banks can still include it on their balance sheet. They're basically rolling your receivables, and if they are doing a long delay, if there is a long delay, that may signal a liquidity crisis for that institution.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, my understanding is that a lot of banks have trading accounts. They go into the various markets with that money while it's floating.
Yeah, they very well could. And of course, if they did that today, we may see very long delays getting your money back from PayPal.
Yeah. Well, it's I don't know how much it is. I would love to know just what the total amount is that is being out there in the ether while it's going from one account to the other.
It's interesting though, but that kind of activity was what was expressly forbidden by Glass-Steagall, which was that financial institutions couldn't blend their customers' cash with their own investment cash. But of course, Glass-Steagall was torn out. And so now, the banks can actually play in the stock market with checkings and savings funds.
Yeah. Okay, well, just thought I'd bring that point out.
All right, well, thank you very much.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
All right. Yeah, I'm wondering what the repercussions are going to be from this morning's stock rout. The Dow ended 617 down. At one point, it was over 700 down. And again, this is in response to China announcing retaliatory tariff hikes. And China announced those yesterday, and people were looking at the Dow futures last night and saying, oh boy, it's going to be a bad, bad day. And it certainly was. So China is also saying that along with the tariffs, they're going to stop purchasing agricultural products from the United States. It's cutting its orders for Boeing planes, and even worse, could start dumping Treasuries. We got to take a break for station identification. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And we're talking about China's retaliatory tariffs. And we're in a full-blown trade war. Thank you, Donald Trump. And I noticed earlier today he actually went on TV trying to do damage control and talking about his vision of an America as it once was, where we were a manufacturing powerhouse, and we bought America, and America came to buy here. And that was definitely a golden time. But we weren't ready to make the leap from where we are now to that vision when Trump started this tariff war. So China is dropping hints about dumping U.S. Treasuries, which could cause a lot of economic harm. They could dump their U.S. stocks. China is invested in a lot of real estate here in the United States. They could start dumping that. If this thing gets really, really ugly, there's going to be a lot of damage. Now, China is out there saying there will never be a trade deal until the U.S. agrees to their demands. So they're talking tough. Article over in The Guardian. Donald Trump's trust in trade war tactic is a big electoral gamble. And they're looking at this trade war from the point of view of if Donald Trump thinks it's somehow going to win him votes. It's a huge, huge gamble. And I would say looking at the stock market right now, Trump is going to lose this one. I mean, if you go back and you look at the revelations from the New York Times leak of his tax returns, he's not a good businessman. He's lost a lot of money over the years. And I think he's made another mistake here. National Economic Council Director Larry Kudlow admitted yesterday on Fox News that American importers and consumers will pay the tariffs on the Chinese imports. Now, you've probably been hearing President Trump's claims that China pays the duties. China pays the duties. No, the tariffs are imposed at the border. You get to pay the tariffs. Get ready for prices on anything coming from China to go right through the roof. And by the way, Goldman Sachs is saying exactly the same thing. Okay, let's take some phone calls now. Sherry in Texas, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Thank you, Mike. Here's a little tip for, at least it works here, from our local bank, a good, strong local bank that's well established and popular, whatever the people think is the best bank in town, not associated with any big, giant mega banks. And I get my gift cards now for Christmas. I give one to my son and daughter-in-law from my local bank, $3 extra charge per gift card.
Yeah.
And I just write the checks right there out of my bank account, and they add the $3 on there, and then I wrap those up. And they have nice little, things you can fold over them, and like HEB does, like the grocery store have little gift card things. This is the way to go. These big pillars of Wall Street banks, they're not the place to go for things like that. I agree with you totally. No debit, credit, or ATMs. My life is much happier without that. My bank provides anything I need, and I still have a lot of good things to think about. I wish we all had a bank like the Bank of North Dakota, because they never got caught up in that subprime mortgage thing, and I hope we'll all have a bank like that. That's a central bank for us someday. I'm hoping things will morph into a better system of banking.
let me step in here for a second. My concern about the gift cards is that very few people run them all the way down to zero, and they just get thrown in a drawer, sitting there with $3, $5, $7 on there, which is basically money you gave to the bank that they didn't give to the gift recipient. And I even remember a while back, there was a company that was saying, send us your unused gift cards, we'll send you a check, but they didn't last too long. So why use it? The other concern I have about a gift card is if you're giving to just children, is it's part of the brainwashing that using plastic is what they're supposed to do as opposed to using cash. Now, I remember when I was a kid, we had little toy play sets, with toy play money and then eventually Monopoly, and it was a cash environment. Today, it's everyone's pushing, use a card, use a card, use a card, use a card.
You know what I did once, Mike? I wanted to get something, I think it was at Walgreens or something, some paper plates or some little thing. And I got out this gift card. It was a Visa thing that I had given to me as a gift. And I said, can you put this on this purchase and I'll just pay the remainder? And they figured it up for me. And I had the gift card, finish off. And then it was maybe, a couple bucks over that for the plate. And so I just gave them, you don't have to spend up to the penny. You can add a little money and they'll figure it at least.
Oh yeah. You can overspend the card and pay the balance in cash.
I wouldn't
not everybody does.
Had money on it.
Okay.
Huh? Pardon? What was your final word there?
My final word was that, you can overspend it. But again, my experience with the gift cards is that not everybody thinks to do that.
Okay.
They'll use the card once, especially if it's a branded card for like a restaurant. They'll go to the restaurant and they'll use it, and then it'll just, again, sit in the drawer. Because they don't go back to that restaurant all that often. Anyway, listen, Sherry, we're going to let you go. Thank you for the phone call. We're going to do a shout out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. And we're going to go back to the phones to Peter in California. Aloha, Peter. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, can you give me a minute or two to be so depressing to everybody that hopefully they'll laugh?
Go for it.
We are, personal debt is at an all-time high in the United States. Governmental debt at all levels is an all-time high. We've got retail again and automobile sales again. We've got collapsing real estate values on the West Coast and the East Coast. We have these multiple trade wars and sanctions, that everything is being gone up. We have a total government out of control where the states aren't obeying and the localities aren't obeying the federal law for like sanctuary states and so on, where the national security state. The intelligence agencies, the FBI, DOJ, is trying to have a coup against the sitting president, where the former president tried to submarine his successor, Trump, Obama, who clearly was involved in all this stuff.
Yes.
We have wars breaking out everywhere. It's the end, like the end of the Roman Empire, where all the alliance systems are falling apart, where the security systems are falling apart, where the financial system internationally is falling apart. We can't raise enough food. The Pacific Ocean is dying.
Yes.
The Caribbean and the Gulf of Mexico as a source of food is all but gone. The Midwest is being flooded, and we can't grow grain. But you know what? We have the smartest president of all time. So that's some comfort, I guess.
Okay.
Foreign policy, by the way, is being dictated by a foreign country in its fifth column in the United States. So that's where we are right now, Mike.
Yep. It's a mess. But, for years now, I've been predicting a Soviet Union-style collapse for this country. And obviously, we have to go through phases like this, where it all starts to come apart with all the infighting. And
Mike, it's coming apart so fast and so completely and all over the world, it seems, that I'm terrified of what this is going to be for my daughter. Oh my God. But this looks like a World War III to me. I mean, this is like a coming of a new dark age.
I agree. I absolutely agree. And
one more thing, Mike, if I could, we also have we're at the point right now where the government in the past has always needed to have the loyalty, to at least be legitimate enough to have the loyalty of the army and the police, the military and the police. But now, because of course they would need them to shoot at the public if necessary, and to keep the people in power that are there. But now we have, one drone operator can operate 10 drones or whatever, and a couple of psychopaths with drones. You don't need that. The government can so de-link itself from the people that it doesn't require any loyalty at all. And then on top of that, now you have the coming of these drone swarms that it's guys like Bezos and what's the Microsoft guy's name again?
Bill Gates.
And all that. They can afford to buy that. They can buy killer drones all over the place themselves. So it's going to be like the governments in the state won't even have a monopoly on violent power. And
yeah, that's a very scary situation. And there's this TV show called Elementary, which is sort of a redoing of the Sherlock Holmes myth, legend, if you will. And they actually had an episode in which somebody was murdered with a micro drone. So they're already thinking about it out there.
Expensive, Mike. Yeah. And guys like, a guy like Bezos, he could have thousands of them, and completely independent of any country. You can plug anybody's personal name into it or whatever. And where are we going with this? I mean, it's really something. It's like chaos right now.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at all the censorship we're seeing on all these giant corporate media outlets, it's a small step from censorship to assassination, isn't it? If you think about it.
Yeah, and nobody can get to the bottom of it. We have complete gridlock in government. The Democrats, criminals that they are, Republicans also criminals, billionaire criminals that support them both, like as Leo said.
Yep.
Elections that cannot be relied upon for being truthful, and it's just the press, at least the mainstream press or corporate press, is completely compromised. There's nothing. There's no institution that you can that you can bet on at all that inspires any confidence. Geez, even the SEALs are killing the Green Berets. It's just unbelievable. I'm so afraid for my daughter, who's only 16. So.
Yeah, I mean, being at the age I'm at right now and seeing the way the world is, as longtime listeners know, I grew up wanting to be a dad, and it didn't happen. But now at this point in my life, I'm actually glad I did not have a child or two, for exactly the same reasons you're saying.
Well, Mike, I'm your age, and I had my daughter late in life, one child, and now that Strom Thurmond and Hugh Hefner are dead, I think I'm the world's oldest father. It's so scary, and the reason why I waited so long was the same reason that you're talking about. I could see a lot of this coming, and I didn't want to bring anybody in. It turns out she's the biggest blessing in my life, and I'm glad that I did it. But nevertheless, I really am. What we're leaving her is what I'm leaving her is really. It's a hell of a bad world.
And I mean, it's already a messed up world for them with all this transgender nonsense and snowflake sensitivity and liberal propaganda. I mean, kids are just really messed up these days.
She's a mixed kid, Mike. Straight A student at a really elite, private school and all that, and almost maxed her ACTs. But I'll tell you what, she's conflicted. I can see it with the whole black and white. How they're pitting everybody against each other.
Yeah,
there are all these organizations that glorify basically her black identity and vilify her white identity. And we sit down and have conversations about it, and then there's the whole gender thing, and oh my God, it's just unbelievable.
Yeah.
So
it's an insane time. It really is, fall of Rome kind of stuff going on. Sometimes I think Caligula has, regained the throne in Washington, D.C.
At least Nero can fiddle. This guy can't do anything, But Mike, I gotta roll off and pick her up from school. As a matter of fact, thank you.
All right. Well, thank you for the phone call. We're going to let you go. The phone lines are open. Getting on back to the economic news, the stock market drop this morning, predictably sent precious metals surging. Gold was back above 1,300 in a rather huge volume. Apparently, a lot of people decided now's the time to get out of the stock market and get into the metals. So we'll see if that holds. Now, because of that incident over the weekend with these mysterious explosions that rocked the UAE port of Fujairah and damaged apparently 4 commercial ships, crude oil prices jumped as much as 2%. So you're going to see an increase in prices at the gas pump. Everything is just... Peter was right. The world is just getting worse. Over at Morgan Stanley, their clients got hit with a massive loss after the disastrous Uber initial public offering from Goldman. And although the bank will still take home a sizable chunk of the underwriting fees, minus whatever they've been obligated to spend and try and stabilize the stock, Morgan's hopes to strengthen ties between its wealth management business and its investment banking side have been dealt a serious setback. So I guess that Uber IPO did not go very well at all. Okay, there are 7 banks that were caught rigging the multi-trillion-dollar foreign exchange market that are being fined by the European Union. And that's JP Morgan, Royal Bank of Scotland, UBS, and a small Japanese bank. The rest remain unnamed. It's like we've become a criminal planet. It's a criminal planet. Okay, down on the border. Down on the border. It's been another record month for illegals crossing over. Apparently, there's a problem with Border Patrol agents contracting illnesses, and a lot of them are having to call in sick. The GoFundMe campaign to build the wall apparently ended without accomplishing anything here. Down in Guatemala, their Secretary of Strategic Intelligence, Mario Duarte, says that migrants arriving in the United States-Mexico border are coming to the country for economic reasons. They are being weaponized as a picketing mob for the International Open Borders organizations. This is all being driven. The Pentagon has announced that they're going to pull money, unused money, from ballistic missile and surveillance plane programs to fund the border wall. It's going to be $1.5 billion. And this comes under the heading of reprogrammed money, which is where they'll have a budget for something. Usually they go over budget, sometimes they don't. Miracle on miracles. And that's where they're getting this money to try and get the wall started. Anyway, we got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And we're going to go right back to the phones to Rick in Arizona. Aloha, Rick. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
A couple of quick items. Steve Elkins was running a rerun yesterday, but he was concerned why everybody was so hot on the Queen and the monarchy over there. Well, you know, I've worked with junkets and stuff like that over the years, and the people from England love the Queen. Over there, they have retirement, and they have health care, unlike people here in America where people are sweating their premiums and their retirement. That is a big drain on everyday life.
Yes.
And over in Europe, they don't worry about that. Okay? So, you know, when people think to sell you capitalism, well, it works for, 7% of the nation. So that's but for Steve Elkins. As far as over here, they're slowly flooding the immigrants into this country like they're doing over in Europe. But over here, I think they're going to do it to create a population that they can just steal the money right out of the bank. As we break down the white community, and we flood it with all these people that are used to being oppressed, it's going to be simple to delete people's bank accounts if they feel like they need to. And what can you do about it? You're going to call the district attorney. Well, what if the district attorney's from India and he's on the payroll for the bank? So in my mind, the end game here is to change the population to where they can just outright steal the money. And if we do, I got one quick question for you, Mike. What keeps our money safe in the bank here in the United States currently?
Well, supposedly the FDIC.
Yeah. Well, it's white men with guns. Okay. Go anywhere where there's no white men, and you'll see all you're going to see is poverty. Everywhere you go to Mexico, none of those people have any money except for, probably this top 10 or 15% in the whole country. Go to Africa. Just go anywhere where there's no white men, and all you're going to have is poverty.
Why don't you take a look at Appalachia? A lot of white people there, a lot of poverty.
Yeah, but they don't steal their money out of the bank. And so they got bad ground. They can't grow things. It's just a different type of place. But overall, Mike, where there's no white men, all there is poverty.
I'm sorry. I'm having a real problem with that one. Anyway, Rick, thank you for the phone call. We're going to let you go and switch over to Jim in Illinois. Aloha, Jim. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Michael. Rick is being very racist, to be honest with you. Today, I was listening to Donald Trump, and this is his solution as far as the tariffs. He said Americans should buy made in America products only. Well, Michael, where can you find made in America products?
That's the problem. I mean, I saw that broadcast as well where he's trying to do damage control on the stock market today. And when he started this whole trade war, I observed on this very program, we're not positioned to take advantage of the tariffs because our manufacturing has declined. The factories haven't been built yet. And yeah, we'd like to buy American. I'd like to buy American. You can't find anything because previous administrations encouraged offshoring. The globalists basically wanted a world where everybody was interdependent on each other. And so all the electronics are going to get made in this part of the world, and all the cars are going to get made over here, and all the food will be grown over here, and all the clothing made over here. So that there's this global commerce that keeps the whole one world government together. But it's starting to come apart here. And Trump moved too precipitously on this trade war because, again, we don't have companies building made in America all that much, except for some of the defense contractors, and a lot of their products are now being, well, we American citizens can't buy those anyway.
Right. And finally, I read where these trade wars are going to cost the average American between $700 and $1,000 each year, if not more.
Probably more.
Right. Well, Michael, you take care.
All right. Thanks an awful lot here. And we're going to start with James in South Carolina. But, James, I'm probably going to have to take you through a commercial break. What's on your mind?
I've just been listening to people, you and other people, talking about for a long time about how we're going to come to a crash. Well, some of the people are saying that, they're stunned that we haven't had a crash, 2 or 3 years ago.
Yes.
Well, the question is, do you think maybe it's possible that the powers that be have figured out how to run an economy at this level for long periods of time? Maybe you can do it. Maybe there's some way they've figured out how to do
I think what they're doing is they're rigging all the numbers in the markets to try and keep it going, but they're not going to be able to do that forever. I mean, this big whang this morning could be the beginning of a major downturn.
Well, it might be, but it just seems to me this has gone on much longer than anyone would have ever suspected. If it can go on this long, maybe there are other rabbits they can pull out of there. I don't know. I'm just.
All right. Well,
10 years ago, I bought a bunch of silver.
Okay. Well, James, got to let you go. Got to take another break for commercials. More callers after we come back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, and we're going to go back to the phones to Al in Canada. Aloha, Al. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. You having a good day?
So far.
Sounds like you're having a good day. So I hate doing this to you, but I got to be honest. Things are going to get better. They're not. It's not possible.
No.
More and more cash is going to be needed to pay a higher and higher debt load. And of course, we know what debt-based monetary system is made out of. We're basically digging our own hole by allowing this to continue on. And, at some point, someone's got to say, okay, this doesn't work.
Well, I think basically, it'll just all come crumbling down. That it'll break to a point where they can't patch it over, they can't duct tape it, they can't use baling wire, and everybody's going to look at what's going on in Washington, D.C. and say, this is no longer our government, and we're just going to have to break off and start, forming something new, a restart. That's what we need. We need a restart button.
Yeah. But, where would that lead to? Like, honestly.
Well, nations go through a life cycle. And usually they're born out of a sincere desire by the people for self-government and a decent living, a decent lifestyle. And I think that will happen in the United States as well. Yes, there's going to be a lot of carpetbaggers. There are going to be a lot of the old career politicians who are going to try and set up shop again. But I'm hoping that they'll be given a ride out of town on a rail. But the U.S. government has gotten this nation into this hideous corner, both economically and militarily, and I don't see a way out other than for it to all fall apart.
Well, yeah. The average age of the world's of the greatest civilizations, and you're in one of them. It's 200 years.
Yep.
Right? From apathy to dependence. From dependency back to into bondage.
Yes.
Sir Alex Fraser Tyler. That was on your website.
Yes, I know. It's in the quotes file.
Yes, it's perfect.
Yeah.
I think it's absolutely perfect. Yeah, we're at the end, eh, Mike?
Yes, we're at the bondage stage, and I think it signals the end. And I certainly don't want to see that, but then looking at how much this government has changed since I was a kid, and how the quality of life of Americans has just deteriorated during my lifetime, looking at all the surveillance and the spying and the endless rules and regulations trying to control every little aspect of our lives, this certainly wasn't the nation I thought it was going to be when I was growing up.
No, it's actually hideous.
Yes, good word.
I don't use any of those electronic devices or any of those social media websites, so I'm kind of away from it a bit. But at the same time, I understand what's going on, and it's horrible. But just before I go, I'd like to say I had an account on CBC, and I was kicked off like 3 months ago. So I was given a 3-month ban. And the other day, it was going to be up, so I went to log in, and it said I had another 6-month ban. So I hadn't even gone back on, and they already banned me for another 6 months.
Now, where is this?
CBC.
Canadian Broadcast. Okay, yeah.
Yeah. So you understand why I'm not allowed on until like October 1st.
I'm
conservative.
It's insane.
Even the tax-funded, outlets are doing this sort of thing. It's awful.
It is.
But I guess, the things got to get worser before they're going to get better. So I'm kind of hoping for a turnaround, Mike.
Well, it concerns me that along with all the liberalism that's going on out there and the banning of the conservatives, is they're talking up socialism and its inevitability, and it's almost like we're having to go through our own version of the Russian Revolution. And socialism, unfortunately, ultimately, in the long run, it doesn't really work all that well. And but it does look like, they're out to just totally change what this country is, what it's all about.
Yeah, they want to just change it, absolutely. It's unfortunate, but I think a lot of people are awake to it, Anyway, I appreciate your time, Mike. You have a good show.
All right, thank you very much, and we're going to go to Don in Iowa. Don, thank you for waiting patiently. What's on your mind?
Hello, Mark. That guy, I forget exactly what he said, something to the effect that wealth is only created when there's white men with guns. And you told him to take a look at Appalachia.
Yep.
Also, take a look at Japan. What about Asia? They definitely.
Oh yeah. No, his comment was just racism. It was just racist.
Unless he's going to consider all Asian people white, which I guess you could, but most people don't. I mean, it's a different race. It's.
No, I'm even getting emails from people saying that it was an obviously racist comment.
He was beyond the pale, but I was personally, I never could understand Asians. They say they're yellow, and I guess if you look real hard, some of them you can see a kind of a yellowish tint, but still, basically they're pretty close to being white. I always thought. But anyway, that's just a side thing. Yeah, but that guy was off the rails on that. I mean,
he was. I let him go on way too long.
Talking about banks, the banks always have a white guard there with a gun. That's what I thought he was getting at. But then I don't know what he's getting at after that.
Well,
everything's going to hell in a handbasket. But hopefully, we just have to keep plugging along, and maybe something good will happen.
Okay, and by the way, I've been in banks where the security cards are black.
They are.
So, I mean, I don't know where he was coming from or what his agenda was, but it really wasn't working. Anyway, Don, we're going to let you go here and switch over to Mark in North Carolina. Aloha, Mark. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, what's on my mind is this obvious false flag that happened with those tankers. I mean, this is getting so dangerous now. This idiot that's in the White House, he continues to have these rats, in his administration, Bolton, Pompeo, and Abrams. And if you keep a rattlesnake as a pet, right?
Yes.
And if you introduce him to friends, let's say you take him to work and all that, and let him crawl around and start biting people, you shouldn't be surprised, because that's what they'll do. They'll start biting.
Yes.
Okay. Well, the same thing here. When you get these warmongers, and then they try to start wars all over the place, why be surprised? These people are subhuman. They don't need to be in high positions of government. Abrams is a convicted felon, and Trump is an idiot. That's all I can think. He's an idiot. From what I understand, he had a problem the other day with Bolton, but he keeps him on anyway. Why doesn't he go like on his silly show that he used to have and say, "You're fired"? No.
Well, probably because Sheldon Adelson would, call in all the loans.
Well, let him call in all the loans. You got to make a stand, man. This guy is, you would think he thinks of his own kids, because this could lead to nuclear war. Probably wouldn't, because I think Putin's smarter than that. I don't think he's gonna gamble the planet. He'll just support the Iranians. He'll give them weapons and everything like that. But what will happen? And I told you that before, and I think it's obvious. You're going to have, especially if he gets involved with Venezuela on top of it, you're going to have a draft. You don't have the people joining the military that you had anymore. They're picking from the bottom of the barrel. Okay, people aren't picking anymore. This is. I don't care what kind of bonus they give. There is going to have to be a draft. Okay, there's almost no doubt about it. Once there's a draft, if Trump thinks he has I could run I could run a bag of poop and put it up for president, and that bag of poop will probably would beat Trump in the next election if he gets into a war and then has a draft. Not only that, it will be riots. I think this country, I don't know if this country could even absorb. I mean, it would make the 60s look tame. People are smarter than that today. Young people understand. Generation Z and millennials, they understand what's going on. They don't get their news from Fox, MSNBC, and the crap news network. They don't get it from that. They get it right on the internet. They get it from people like you. I know they try with the algorithms to try to change it, but if you really want, you can still find what you're looking for. All you got to do is hit the hit the button, and you'll be notified. If you're not notified, you just keep looking around. If you know what you're looking for, you can find it. Whether you do it on the internet itself, look for websites, whether you're on YouTube, wherever else. I'm watching you on YouTube right now. So I mean, it's not hard. It's not hard, no matter what they try to do. And once people are banned from YouTube, DLive is big now. There's a number of other stations, and you get people like Ryan Dawson. You talked about Ryan Dawson before.
Yes.
He said some very nice things about you yesterday too. I watched that show where we was talking about the dancing Israelis. It is so obvious too, by the way, Mike. Israel is not in our best interest. They're not how I heard something on the radio. They said, "Oh, they're our most important." They're not an ally at all. They're an enemy. So they're looking out for themselves to get their best interests, and they will use this country to get into one war or another because they know they can't beat Iran by themselves. Iran would destroy them. The only thing they probably have to use nukes. My opinion is if they use nukes, Russia would nuke them. Okay, or give Iran 4 or 5 nukes. That's all they really need. All it takes is 1 or 2, and that's the end of Israel. If they tried that, so they're not going to go to nukes, but they will. But like I said, but they know they can't beat Iran on their own. They know they'd be being slaughtered. They're too small. They would be destroyed. If they tried to invade, they would be destroyed right on the beaches. So they know the only country that could really defeat them would be able to invade Iran, but at a great cost would be the United States.
Yes.
So they're pushing us just like they pushed us with Iraq. You look at some of the old pictures of Netanyahu opening his big fat trap about Iraq, he was saying the same thing he's now saying about Iran. All right? How can people possibly believe this dirtbag? He is no good. Netanyahu, he's not even, he wants to bring the Talmud to run Israel. The Talmud is full of witchcraft and Satanism. That's what it is. It's not the Torah. Okay, I know you don't believe in God at all. I know you probably don't believe in the Bible, or you at least think it's just. But the thing is this: the Old Testament has its problems, but that's not what Netanyahu wants to govern by. He wants to govern by the Talmud, which is you talk about radicals.
Yes.
Mike, I know you don't think so, but I do believe this more and more that there is a tie-in between the Saudi Wahhabis and certain Jewish sects, mostly the Talmudists and stuff. And that's what it is. A lot of people say the Saudis are really crypto Jews. Wouldn't surprise me. I think there is a tie-in somewhere. Maybe it's through Khazaria. Maybe it's through something else. Khazaria, Khazaria is really Central Asian, so it would be very easy for the Khazarians that migrated to Saudi Arabia and all that. But basically, the people of Central Asia look very similar to Arabs anyway. Okay, the Semites. So it's very possible that they, some of them went to Saudi Arabia, or the Arabian Peninsula. Others went up to Eastern Europe and stuff like that. Mingled with, they probably, I think a number of them became Jews, and they probably then mixed with European Jews. Okay, but the thing is this: I think somewhere there may be a tie-in. I don't know. I can't say for sure. I'm trying to find out. It's very difficult. If I could read those languages, either Arabic and or Hebrew, it might be easier to find out. But I'm telling you, there is something rotten about that. I think most radical forms of Judaism and of Islam are tied in somehow. There's no, ISIS never.
Okay, well, Mark, you've made your point, and you keep repeating yourself here. So it may be, it may not be. There really isn't a good, accurate mapping, if you will, of mass migrations in pre-biblical times. So it may very well be that people turn left instead of right. Anyway, we're going to let you go here right now and switch over to Dustin in New Jersey. Aloha, Dustin. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Mike, I don't worship anything. I don't worship no religion. I'm a Catholic. I don't go to church. And I don't worship the flag because, it's called critical thinking skills. If your country does wrong by your government, then you got to call them out for it. Like the Germans should have done in Nazi Germany.
Yes.
It's the same thing. But, it doesn't matter if you're American or a Swedish or a European or, British or whatever. I mean, if your government's doing wrong, like what's going on with Brexit or in France with the yellow vest, they're calling them out for it. But, this whole tribal thing is garbage because that's how they get you into that trap of fighting with each other. You got to think for yourself and just, as a human being, what's right and what's wrong. It's very simple. It's not a complicated thing. Mike, having said that, with Trump, with the, Mike, I was on the Zero Hedge. I read them, I read the articles, but what's more important to me is the message board.
Yes.
And a lot of people on the message board are just, because it goes along with tribal things. Those Chinese, we're going to get the Chi-Coms, those noodle-eating people. I seen that. I seen that because it's pushed like that, and but somebody made a comment. They go, basically the center of the universe, which is like the center of trade, is not America anymore, and that's a fact.
Yes.
It's Asia.
Yes.
And I think people are having a hard time with that. It's just you're not as important as you think you were / exceptional. And people seem like they get angry with that. Like, you know what I mean? Like, if you go on YouTube, you can see that with people not getting enough followers.
Yes.
It's like that mindset. So I'm like looking, Mike, there was a website, I can't remember, I got a sore throat, but there was a website that had a real-time, I don't know if any of your listeners you knew, it's like, it showed a real-time trading going on across the world, and like the majority's coming from Asia. I mean, it was like it looked like almost like a vector-style Tempest game.
Yeah.
the graphics are coming out. And I'm
Okay, Dustin, got to put you on hold. Stay on the line. Going to come right back to you after these words from our sponsors. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here, and we're still talking with Dustin in New Jersey, and we're talking about just how bad things are, and we're not the greatest nation on earth any longer. I think that was one of the most brilliant and honest pieces of television in HBO's series The Newsroom, on its debut episode, where the main character, the news anchor, is part of this college symposium with some other people, and they're all being asked, what makes America the greatest nation on earth? And he stands up and he says, it isn't. We're not the greatest nation on earth anymore. And it's certainly true. Anyway, Dustin, what's your thought?
You also read off all those countries that are ahead of us. I mean, we are behind now, people. I mean, everybody complains about socialism, but when you turn 65, I bet you ain't you're gonna wait till that check gets in the mail from Social Security. You hate socialism. That check is like your savings grace. That's how far we've fallen. You know, you look back at when in the 50s, one man went to work, his wife and kids went to school, and his wife stayed home. And it was actually, even though you don't have all the knickknacks like we got now, like a TV and a toilet, you know, like it was one man can fund his wife and his kids going to school. It's not like that anymore. People are working multiple jobs, or the wife's going to work too, and they're basically not making ends meet. So something's gone wrong.
Yes, something has gone wrong. I mean, the wealth of the workers whose labor creates that wealth is being sucked out of their pockets, and it goes into the banks. It's going into the war machine. It's going to Israel. We're in a wartime economy. And if you know anybody who's old enough to remember what life was like in this country during World War II, it might be enlightening to talk to them.
And not to say it wasn't easy, because I didn't, I was born in 1970, so obviously it wasn't hard, but no life is hard in any era. You know, like what Trump's doing is wrong. Like, I mean, we're not the center of the world anymore. You know, China is ahead on AI and 5G in cloud computing and quantum computing if you want to really go in depth with quantum computing, which I'm kind of iffy on. But I mean, we have fell behind. We're not. They're about, I'd say, a couple of years ahead. And Mike, I watched the documentary. They have like a whole complex. You got to take a train to the next building, and it looks like it's right out of Europe. It's another look like a Victorian-looking building. I mean, they're ahead. And if people watch these videos just on China building infrastructure, trying to do in this China, they're moving ahead. We need to stop the wars. We need to really rebuild our infrastructure, because Alpha.
Well, you're absolutely correct. I'm sorry to cut you off, but we're at the end of the segment. But you're absolutely correct. These other countries have been investing in infrastructure, the One Belt, One Road, better roads, better highways, better rail systems. And the United States has been investing in the machinery for war, and it's all they've got left. And so that's their idea. Well, our roads and rails and bridges are falling apart, but by golly, we got lots of tanks. Let's roll them on out to that rail yard and get them on their way to Iran. Anyway, Dustin, thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to let you go. We're going to take a break and be back with hour number 3 after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're talking about immigration, and just like we had with those callers, Kamala Harris is now on the bandwagon of saying that, yes, illegal immigrants should receive U.S. government-supplied health care. Free stuff, free stuff, free stuff. Except it's not free. Somebody has to pay for it. And especially in this country where health care is so expensive, it's just insane here. Back in 2006, Joe Biden was on the other side of the immigration issue. He said, we need a border wall, and we need to punish American employers who hire illegals. This was in 2006 at a South Carolina Rotary Club. And he said he proudly voted for the Secure Fence Act, authorizing the construction of 700 miles of fencing at the southern U.S. border, of which only 30 miles were actually built. And nobody ever went back and said, what happened here? Back in 2006, he was calling for a crackdown on companies that hire the illegals. Today, of course, he's on the other side. Oh yeah, let's bring them all in. They're all going to be Democratic voters. Over in the state of Rhode Island, 4 towns have declared themselves Second Amendment sanctuaries over the last 2 weeks. Apparently, Burrillville was the first to make the declaration. It was then followed by Hopkinton, West Greenwich, and Foster. Down in the Philippines, President Duterte wants to hand out 42,000 free guns to the public to battle illegal drugs and crime. Bet you it's going to work, too. In Oregon, there's a school district that is being sued because apparently a teacher repeatedly grilled this 8-year-old student about whether he thought he is a girl, and then giving him videos on transgenderism to watch and providing instructional books. Unfortunately, that type of behavior is starting to spread across the country, already in California. Forget about reading, writing, and arithmetic. Come on in here. Do you really think that you're a boy or a girl? Let's talk. So anyway, up in the Woodburn, Oregon, the parents of this student filed a lawsuit saying their son was held back from recess by the teacher for these multiple one-on-one conversations about his gender identity. And of course, the parents were not told what the teacher was doing. So they're suing the school district for nearly $1 million. I hope they get it. All right, let's take another phone call. David in California. Aloha, David. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, you were just talking about Joe Biden in 2006 and the border. Did you hear that it's like a 3-minute video? Bernie's being interviewed by this guy named Ezra Klein, and I don't know what agency he's from, what news agency, but he was talking, assuming Bernie was for open borders. He says, open borders? No, that's a Koch brothers thing. That's a Republican thing. I'm not for open borders. You know, you need a nation state. He was in support of a nation state. And then I guess later on, I didn't do research after that, but I think someone got to him and wanted him to, go in line with the Democratic overall policy.
Well, it's not just Democratic. This open border stuff, this is coming right down from the globalists like George Soros. And
I agree with you.
Yeah.
And it's true what Bernie said to a certain extent. There's a lot of Republican owners of different farms or whatever, and Democrats, but there's both sides wanted illegal workers and stuff. Some wanted, in general, the Democrats wanted more for the votes, and other corporations wanted it for the cheap labor. So anyways, that's a pretty interesting video. It's really clear. It's all out there, 2015. Okay, that's all I wanted to say, Mike, anyway.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go. The phone lines are open again. And we mentioned this story last week, and it had to do with this transgender weightlifter. This is a guy who identifies as a girl, and he basically broke 4 records. And the Raw Powerlifting Federation has basically stripped this weightlifter, Gregory, of the titles. And he said, our rules and the basis of separating genders for competition are based on physiological classification rather than identification. And on the basis of all the information presented to the board of directors for this particular case, the conclusion made is that the correct physiological classification is male. So they stripped him of the records, and none of the existing female records were broken. Common sense at last. Okay, we're going to do a shout out now to our honor affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. Chelsea Manning, who was released a week ago after a 2-month detention for contempt, may be looking at a potential return to legal limbo because prosecutors have convened another grand jury, and she is being called on to testify there, and she's already saying she will not. Now, Manning was held for refusing to testify at the first anti-WikiLeaks grand jury, and they released her when that jury ended. This new, very similar grand jury wants to ask the same questions all over again. Now, her lawyers are challenging the legality of her first detention, as U.S. law only allows contempt detentions if there is a chance it will coerce the person into testifying. Clearly, in the case of Chelsea Manning, it wasn't working. The courts probably don't want to face establishing that precedent, even though it is the law, so they ended the first detention on a technicality. So we'll see what happens here. Now, interestingly enough, up in Sweden, their prosecutors said they're reopening the rape case against Julian Assange, and they are going to seek his extradition from Britain. So there's going to be a little bit of a tiff back and forth between the United States and Sweden. And British authorities will have to decide which extradition request takes precedent. The attempt to hack into a Pentagon computer or a rape. I think Assange would actually be better off going to Sweden than the United States. Okay. Assange's lawyers are protesting Ecuador's plan to basically take all of Julian Assange's documents from their British embassy and send them to the United States. Now, after ejecting Assange from the embassy, Ecuador's Lenin Moreno is escalating the persecution of critics and perceived foes. Ola Bini for his political sympathies, censoring critical media, and jailing progressive leadership in a sweeping crackdown. Over in Sri Lanka, they have blocked most major social networks. Apparently, there was a Facebook post that somehow sparked anti-Muslim riots. And so Sri Lanka has basically just shut that all down. Now, this was an interesting story. This came out over the weekend here. Everyone knows about Mark Zuckerberg and Facebook. But in the early days, when he started it, Chris Hughes was one of his roommates and became a Facebook co-founder. Now, Hughes left Facebook more than 10 years ago. He's liquidated his Facebook stock. It made him a multimillionaire, hundreds of millions of dollars. Now, Hughes has gone public in a lengthy opinion piece for the New York Times. He's saying the company gives too much power to Mark Zuckerberg. And he's saying it's time to break Facebook up. He's calling on President Trump to break it up. And Hughes said, "I'm disappointed in myself and the early Facebook team for not thinking more about how the newsfeed algorithm could change our culture, influence elections, and empower nationalist leaders. And I'm worried that Mark has surrounded himself with a team that reinforces his beliefs instead of challenging them." So here you have the co-founder of Facebook out there saying it's time to start breaking it up. Over at Twitter earlier today, they've announced they've inadvertently collected and shared iOS location data due to a software bug. And the company admitted that they were inadvertently collecting this location data with one of our trusted partners in certain circumstances. So they're out there apologizing. and they're claiming that it wasn't detailed location data, that the data, when it arrived at the trusted partner, consisted of zip codes only. Turning over to Amazon and their Alexa. Last year, a coalition of privacy advocates and child psychologists warned against putting an Amazon Alexa speaker anywhere near your child on the reasonable grounds that developing minds shouldn't befriend always-on surveillance devices, no matter how cute the packaging. So now a group of privacy researchers, attorneys, and U.S. senators are calling on the Federal Trade Commission to investigate Amazon's alleged violations of COPPA, C-O-P-P-A, a law protecting the littlest users of all. Okay, scam alert on this one. And it's called the One Girl Scam, or the One Ring Scam. And the scam works like this. The scammer calls your phone and hangs up after 1 or 2 rings. And they may do it several times until you finally say, what the heck is this thing? And the idea is to get you to call back. And you will pay long-distance fees connected to the call, fees that are paid in part to the scammer. These calls are being made from countries where your phone line can be billed. Some of them huge. The FCC says the numbers can come from anywhere, but recently the agency is noticing a lot of international numbers. So if you aren't expecting a call from a number abroad, don't try and call the number back. Sometimes it seems like all this high tech is more curse than blessing. Getting into medical stuff here, Americans are now driving to Canada for cheaper insulin as the prices continue to skyrocket here in the U.S. Apparently, people in Minnesota started an Insulin for All initiative, and they organized a caravan to Canada, driving 5 hours to purchase insulin for $30 a vial rather than the $300 per vial they would pay in the United States. Now, one of the things I'm disappointed in Donald Trump is when he was campaigning in 2016, one of the things he said he wanted to do was look at why medical services and medicines were so expensive in the United States compared to other countries. And that's another one of the promises he has not kept. Over in Great Britain, there is this chief executive of a company making a potentially life-saving cystic fibrosis drug. The National Health Service says it's unaffordable. It's completely unaffordable. But apparently this chief executive, Jeff Leiden, was paid $18 million in cash and shares last year. So that pay is enough to fund a 1-year course of its cystic fibrosis drug for 137 patients. It's all about the money, all about the money. Right now here in the United States, you're sitting in the most medicated country in the world. 46% of Americans have taken a pharmaceutical drug within the last 30 days. And we're finding out that more and more of them are having psychiatric effects. And we're not talking about drugs that are intended to have psychiatric effects. We're talking about other medications that are for other things like skin rash. They're messing around with the chemistry of the brain, and then we wonder why Americans are acting so bizarre. But again, it's big money. So there's this story out of the Mind Unleashed where Australia's politicians are just pushing vaccines as hard as they can. And apparently one of their new laws is the No Jab, No Pay law, which says citizens who refuse vaccination for themselves or their children will not receive welfare payments. Well, it turns out that Australia's politicians are deeply tied to the financial corporations. Imagine my shock. That includes the Australian Prime Minister and his wife. So by mandating the vaccines, they're making themselves richer. And by the way, down in Australia now, expressing skepticism in vaccines, it can be punishable by 10 years in jail. All right. Apparently, last Friday, 44 states sued some of the nation's largest generic drug manufacturers over conspiracy to inflate prices, in some cases by over 1,000%. Which, again, getting back to that insulin story, they're just raking in the dough. Yesterday was Mother's Day, and snow fell on some parts of Massachusetts. There were reports of snowfall in the southern and central Berkshires, reports of sleet and snow mixed with rain in the northern Litchfield Hills. So it's May, and it's still snowing. Apparently they had a very heavy snowstorm out in the Colorado mountains. So it's still coming down out there. Remember not too long ago where Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez came on out and said that the world will end in 12 years if climate change is not addressed. And apparently there was enough of a pushback where now she's out there saying, well, I was just joking. I was just joking here. And if you believed me, I mean, really, how dumb can you get? Okay. Apple has banned Natural News for publishing true climate science stories that Apple claims are rejected by the scientific community. Back in the days of Galileo here. And meanwhile, so far this month, record May snowfalls. The May snow record has already been smashed, and we're still not out of the month. Story coming out of the BBC. Scientists are testing radical ways to fix Earth's climate. And they're talking about things like refreezing the Earth's poles and removing CO2 from the atmosphere. Well, if you remove CO2 from the atmosphere, plant life will start dying. That means food. And as far as refreezing the Earth's poles, there's no such thing as a machine that makes things colder. It simply pumps the heat from one place to another. So if you're going to refreeze the Earth's poles, where is that heat going to be transferred to? Are you going to beam it out in space? And if you can do that, why bother refreezing the poles? Just, air condition the planet. I can imagine there's going to be a lot of very, very bizarre ideas at that. Soot in the sky, mirrors in the sky. The problem is nobody knows which way the climate is going. They've been screaming, warming Earth, warming Earth, warming Earth. But over the last several years, it's gotten cooler. Winter's getting longer. The growing season's shorter. There's a real problem out there. And they're out there still pushing, human-caused global warming, carbon tax, carbon tax. We got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. And yes, once again, Republic Broadcasting and What Really Happened are standing in front of you with their little tambourines out, begging for donations to keep us going. And we really need them. And by the way, thank you to everybody who has donated, and advance thank you to all of those who are about to. So the postal address where you can send a check, money order, or if you prefer anonymity, cash, is Republic Broadcasting Network, 2251 Double Creek Drive, number 302, Round Rock, Texas, 78664. The phone number where you can make a credit or debit card donation or pledge to be a recurring subscriber is 800-724-2719, extension 1 during business hours, extension 3 at all other times. So the network thanks you. Okay. All right, here it comes. This is just now coming on in. They're blaming that shipping incident near the UAE, saying, yes, it was Iran or they're Iran proxies. So there it is. I'm absolutely sick. We all know this is a lie. We all know that this is a lie to justify a war. I'm just putting this up here right now. Okay, so U.S. officials said Monday that initial assessments of an incident over the weekend in which 4 oil tankers suffered explosions in Emirati waters points to Iranian involvement. 4 oil tankers, 2 Saudi, 1 Emirati, and 1 Norwegian off the coast of Fujairah in the United Arab Emirates suffered on Sunday what the UAE Foreign Ministry called sabotage operations. The explosion blew a 5 to 10 foot hole in each ship near or just below the waterline, according to a U.S. military team. Iranian or Iranian-backed proxies are believed to be behind the attack. Okay, folks, remember the logic from back in Syria? And why would Iran do something like this, knowing it's going to be used as a justification for a full-on war? The bombers are going to be flying tonight. Oh boy, that just it's frustrating when you know it's coming, you know what they're going to do, and then they do it, and there's nothing that you could have done to stop it. Now, I don't think Iran had anything to do with this. I think it was either Israel or U.S. military. That this was the false flag the United States needs. And, of course, this story is just now breaking. I'm waiting to see when it's going to hit on the American corporate media. But I can imagine it's going to be pretty much all over the place. All right, getting on back to the science and climate news. George Clooney, who I admire as an actor and a director, but have a little issue with just how hard leftist he is, basically came on out mocking the Trump administration and denouncing climate change skeptics as dumb, blanking idiots. Now, again, they're trying to basically blur the line here. Nobody doubts that climate changes. It always has, it always will. It's been changing long before humans got here. It'll be changing long after we're gone. So, climate does change. The issue is to what extent human activity has on it. And that is the whole issue. Alrighty. Apparently, Bayer just lost the 3rd trial in a row over claims that Roundup weed killer causes cancer. And a jury in state court in Oakland, California issued its verdict earlier today, awarding more than $2 billion with a B in punitive damages to a husband and wife over their cancer claims. Now, Bayer is obviously going to appeal that, and I'm sure it's going to get knocked down, but that's 3 in a row that they've lost. And on top of all that, now they seem to have a spy scandal happening, where they were spying on influential people in Europe. Okay, over in Illinois, they might start charging $1,000 per year to own an electric vehicle. There's a proposal to hike the Illinois' annual registration fee for electric vehicles from the current $17.50 to $1,000. And it's being called unfair by current electric vehicle owners. And obviously, it's a sales disincentive for those cars, just as the new technology is beginning to gain broader traction. I guess Illinois is desperate to recover the missing gas tax. We're going to be back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. The phone lines are open, and we have a caller on the line right now. Let's go to Glenn in Alabama. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. Long-time listener, rarely call in. Iran's on my mind, and so is Bolton, Pompeo, and Kushner. We can do more than just sit around and talk about this. We got a president that doesn't even know what the nationalists are. He just kind of lumps us in with the religious types, okay?
Yep.
And we in the nationalist community need to step forward, make a difference, make a loud noise. Kushner has a number of initiatives coming out, including the Middle East peace, okay, that's going to completely rob the Palestinians of everything they've got.
Yes.
He's got a immigration bill that's going to bring in 1 million skilled laborers. Trump is already questioning Bolton and his advice on Venezuela. I propose that we do more than just talk about this. We need to get these guys out of there. Trump is up to his eyeballs in snakes.
Well, what are you suggesting here? What are you suggesting here?
I think it's time we hold the Zionists accountable. And half the Zionists we do hold accountable. Jews. The other half of the
all right. I thought we were going to be going there. Yeah, I thought we were headed into this area. We were heading into talking about, we got to get him out there, and it sounded like he was heading toward violence, which we do not endorse here at this website. Okay, getting on back to the news here. As you know, Avengers Endgame is a huge hit. It's made a lot of money for Disney. And despite that, it's still being attacked by these social justice warriors. And it's being accused of ableism, which is the social justice term that characterizes discrimination against the physically disabled. And the reason for that is because the movie is more than 3 hours long. And that can cause a problem for disabled people. And so, again, we're in a culture right now where nothing that you do, everything is subject to complaint and whine. Over in Pennsylvania, there's this principal, Peter Brigg. He's principal at Savoy Elementary School, and he has made the practice of saying, "God bless America," right after the Pledge of Allegiance. And apparently a single parent complained, and now he's been forced to stop it. Now, this is a very gray area, and the argument is being made that saying "God bless America" in a public school does violate the Establishment Clause of the First Amendment. And the reason it's gray, though, is because the First Amendment says Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion. And this principal, Peter, he's not an establishment. And it just feels like the people are just getting too sensitive about these things. I saw this article the other day on the website where these atheists were demanding crosses get taken down. And come on, people, lighten up. I don't have a problem with crosses. I don't have a problem with Stars of David. I think that self-described atheists who make a big stink about crosses are actually very insecure in their atheism. They're not really sure. They haven't really convinced themselves. So that's driving their activism. Okay, they've Over here, they believe in the cross. Over here, they believe in the Star of David. Behind me, they believe in the crescent moon. Fine. Let them believe. Just don't use those things to club each other over the head. And I'll just go on with my non-belief, and we'll all live together in peace. Now, speaking of religion, Pope Francis has decreed that all Catholic priests and nuns must report sexual abuse and its cover-up to church authorities, including wrongs committed by the bishops and the cardinals. This is seen as a groundbreaking edict, and it promises protection for whistleblowers and requires all dioceses to have a system in place to receive claims confidentially. Now, this new law applies retroactively, could unleash a fresh wave of abuse allegations and revelations against the church. And yeah, it probably will. Just absolutely, absolutely unreal. Okay. Down in Florida, I think we talked this story on Friday, but it's worth another mention. Down in Florida, in the city of Dunedin, they want to foreclose on a private home because the owner, Jim Ficken, owes the city over $29,000 in fines. And he was fined repeatedly because his lawn grass was too tall. And they fined him over a period of 8 weeks last summer. They fined him for $500 per day of violation with no warning. Now, Ficken was out of town at the time, settling his mother's estate. Ficken had hired a handyman to deal with the lawn, but in a cruel twist, the handyman also died. And that left the grass uncut. I think the city needs to look at the reality of the situation and say, yeah, it's just things happen. Over in California, they're moving to ban yet another pesticide, chlorpyrifos, after scientists deemed it a toxic air contaminant and discovered it was more dangerous than previously thought, and it's even been blamed for harming brain development in babies. So, interestingly enough, I love antiques and I love adventure, and I'm a big fan of the Mystery of Oak Island. I hope it's not a fake show, but it's a lot of fun to watch. And so I like archaeology. But apparently over in the Glen Canyon National Recreation Area of Utah, and Claire and I actually been there, they found 2 Spanish coins. This is out in Utah. Now, one was minted in Madrid, Spain in 1660. The other one in the 1200s, 200 years before Columbus showed up. Now, we already know the Vikings got to the New World before Columbus did. The Egyptians got to the New World. Maybe it's time to start rewriting some history books. But they're saying their presence in the desert remains unexplained. And there's been no information about whether they were found with other artifacts. But that one about the 1200s, yeah. I mean, unless somebody with a lot of money bought the coins and brought them in and just dropped them, waiting for somebody to stumble over them. But that's a nasty, nasty hoax. Over at NASA, they have this ambitious plan. They want to put humans back on the moon. They were looking at 2024. And NASA's management is being grilled by members of U.S. Congress over the fact that they haven't really put forward a viable plan. Now, Mike Pence announced the 5-year deadline last March and challenged NASA to meet the target, and so far, they haven't really come up with anything yet. Well, I would say probably just start with the original Apollo and scale it up. All right. Meanwhile, over at Blue Origin, they're shooting for the moon. The private spaceflight company revealed its first life-size mock-up of its lunar lander named the Blue Moon at the Washington Convention Center. And Blue Origin founder and chief executive officer Jeff Bezos told a room full of spectators, it's an incredible vehicle and it's going to the moon. Well, one just like it is. That's just a mock-up. The World Health Organization is warning the Ebola outbreak in Congo is now critical. Apparently, armed militants are targeting the healthcare workers. Apparently, there is a cultural distrust of Western medicine, and along with a growing funding cap, it's also a conflict area. But as of a week ago, there have been 1,600 confirmed and probable cases of Ebola virus disease, of which 1,069 have died. That gives it a mortality rate of 67%. This one is nasty. And if it gets out of the Congo, if it gets to anywhere with a major airport, it's definitely going to get nasty here. Okay, take a look here. All righty. A top advisor to Richard Nixon admitted that the war on drugs was a policy tool during the Nixon administration to target the anti-war protesters and black people. Wasn't really about the drugs, it was just about wrecking these people's lives. And somebody's already put up this little video. The U.S. prepares false flag. UAE confirms ship sabotaged off its coast. I can't tell you how upset I am about that. A decade after the recession, 40% of U.S. families are still struggling. I know that we certainly are. The other day, I actually saw this documentary on HBO, The Future of Work, and they were talking about the stunning impact automation is having on our job force, and it's alarming to me. And apparently, Amazon has just started rolling out machines that can pack orders. And on this documentary, they were saying that was the last human job. Everything else was taken over by machines, the sorting, the moving, the bringing around. And it was only because they needed somebody who could move fingers and reach into the bins to get the product. Apparently, they've solved that. We're going to go to the phones now. G in Maryland, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, Mike, I wanted to say something, but before that, you're talking about automation. If you go to YouTube, or you can look up Boston Dynamics.
Yes.
I don't know if you're familiar with that name.
Oh, very much so.
Yeah, man, if you look up the stuff they have like these robots. They got some that like almost humanoid. They got some that are like dogs and
yes.
And like rabbits that they can jump over buildings and whatnot, and they look tough. And I think the government is has some contracts for them. But if you imagine, you put some AI into them and strap guns on those things, the government won't need soldiers anymore. They won't need something with moral decision. They'll just use these automated Terminator-like robots to do the job for the government.
Yeah, that's certainly it's a real possibility. As long as you can afford them, that's the problem. These robots are a lot more expensive than a human soldier.
Well, I mean, sooner or later, humankind's going to come to a point where they're going to realize, hey, look, we're all killing each other for what? Religion, resources. I mean, there's going to be a singularity point where humankind is going to wake up and like, look, we shouldn't go this way. And I wanted to respond something to what Layla said earlier. I read a book before. It's called The Biggest Secret by David Icke. He talks about, there's scenes in there's powers to be in the background of all these, most of these governments that are trying to direct humankind to a certain direction of all these wars, all orchestrated by these powers to be. And they want to ultimately have humankind in this one world dictatorship where there's one world religion, one world government, one world monetary system, and America will eventually be stripped of its sovereignty, and all South America and Canada will be joined together with no borders, and it'll be a new currency called the Electoral. But
they've been talking about the Electoral for a while.
I mean, if humankind doesn't wake up, we're just going to be led by these powers to be into this direction that it doesn't favor us. It doesn't favor our freedom. It doesn't favor.
It is very dystopian out there.
We'll just be enslaved by this one world dictatorship.
Yeah, it's very dystopian out there. Of course, there's the reality that global dictatorships have been tried before, and they fall apart. And they cause a lot of damage and destruction going through that process. Now, this rush for a one world government, new world order is already in trouble. We're seeing nationalist pushback all over Europe and here in the United States of America. You're seeing the influx of the refugees and illegal immigrants is already creating a great deal of hostility. The economy is certainly not doing very well. And we're on the edge of a war that, quite frankly, the United States could lose.
Well, hopefully everybody just wakes up. But that's all I want to say, Mike. You have a great show. Thanks.
All right, thanks an awful lot, and we're going to let you go. We have another caller waiting on the line, but I think I'm going to wait until after we come back from these words from our sponsors. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, last segment of our program today. And yes, it's now on the corporate media. Iran is thought to be responsible for the attack on those 4 commercial ships over there near the Strait of Hormuz. And the investigation is continuing. It's a setup. It's another obvious false flag. The U.S. has been drooling for a war with Iran. They threw the sanctions on there. They pulled out of the P5+1 deal, step by step, goading Iran to get to a war. When Iran refused to bite, they do this. I mean, how obvious does it get? They were sounding a warning only last Friday. Oh, yes, Iran's going to attack commercial shipping. We have it on good authority. Iran's going to attack commercial shipping. Come Sunday, oh, yeah, see, somebody attacked commercial shipping. It has to be Iran. Nobody else in the region would do that. So it's on. Another major Mideast war. And it could set the entire Mideast on fire. All right, we have one final caller for the show today. Miles in Maine. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Michael. I hate to say this, but I'd like to start out with whoever this new screener is. He might be what John Statmiller would call an asshat, because I called in the first time. It wasn't even on 3 seconds, and he hung up the phone. And then when I called it back and asked him his name, he wouldn't even tell me. But that's beside the point. I wanted to get to this point about Comey and all this. And if all this new evidence is true, wouldn't that be collusion?
Yeah. There was a lot of collusion on their part. Yeah, it's just they were focused on Trump. They were out to get Trump, but there was collusion going on. Yeah, I mean, now we've got, what's his name out there saying Comey's under investigation for violating the Espionage Act. These people should be in a lot of trouble, but the entire governmental system, like the corporate media and politics in general, has just swung so hard liberal that liberals can get away with just about anything. A Republican makes a single misstep.
That's right, Michael. But you know what? Where do the prosecutions ever come in?
That's what we're waiting for. And again, we know that their criminal referrals have been made by the Congress to the Department of Justice. But if William Barr doesn't act on them, then we know he's just another in a long line of corrupt attorney generals running cover for the bosses.
Yeah.
Eric Holder, James Comey, Loretta Lynch.
Yep. And I know we all jumped down Sessions' throat, and rightfully so, but my goodness, if we can't get a guy who's Judge Napolitano or somebody independent, Janine Pernero or somebody like this, I think we're in big trouble. But I just wanted to tell you that I hope you and Claire are doing well, and I really hope she's feeling better and that these remedies are trying. I hope something's going to work for her because she's a voice that we really enjoy having on the show, of course, with you.
Well, thank you very much. And Claire's doing better, but she's never going to be all the way back to what she was, and that's just something we both have to accept. Okay, Miles, we're going to let you go here. The music is playing. It's time for me to get out of here and do the Jim Goddard Show. Stay tuned for John Stadmiller. I'm sure he's got lots of interesting things to share with you. Please take what you learn here on this show and on the whatreallyhappened.com website. Share them with everyone that you know. Use email, paper mail. Forget about social media. It's totally compromised right now. Please donate to RBN. Please donate to whatreallyhappened.com. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.